Om Bhurabhuvah Swah Tatsaviturbharenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yo Nah Prachodayat. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Namaste, my dear friends. This is second video on Bhagwan Sri Ramana Maharshi's 40 verses on reality, or Ulladu, Narpdu. The last sentence of video number 1 was, yet ignorance is not apart from the self, because all experiences as thoughts come from the self and are witnessed by it. Verses 6 and 7. Now, verse 14. You and he exist when the I exists. If the root of the I, the one, is found, you and he will also shine as the one. The I exiting you and he also exist. If by investigating the truth of the I and I ceases, you and he will also cease and will shine as the one. This is the natural state of one's being. You and he are the world. It stands and falls with the I or ego, which constructs it. Realizing one's being is realizing the whole world to be the same effulgent being, the one. This state of being is experienced by the self-realized man in the waking state consciously and by all men in dreamless sleep. In dreamless sleep, Susupti, the I, like everything else, disappears and one remains in one's native state in the true I, but generally without retaining memory of this condition on awakening. Verse 15. The past and future are only the present when they occur. Thus the present alone exists. On the present, the past and the future stand. They too are the present in their times. Thus the present alone exists. Ignoring the present and seeking to know the past and the future is like trying to count without the initial unit. The present is always, for even the past was the present in its time, and so also will the future be the present in its time. Whatever happens, therefore, happens only in the present. When Methuselah was born, he was born in the present. When he died after 9 or 10 centuries, he died also in the present despite the later date. Similarly, all that happened to him between these two events happened also in the present. Thus the present is the only significant tense in actuality. Moreover, let us not forget the fact that time is made of instants which are so minute as to have no room either for a past or for a future, but for the present alone. The next verse will tell us that even the present is unreal, being one of the notions of our mind, as past and future are acts of our memory. Verse 16. Time and space do not exist apart from the self. Do time and space exist apart from us? If we are the body, we are affected by time and space, but are we the body? We are the same now, then, and forever. Of course, time and space are mere concepts in us, because in our long journey in life we pass through multitudes of experiences. We have to conceive past, present and future in order to arrange them conveniently in their sequence of occurrence in our memory. Because we perceive multiplicity, we have to conceive a space in which to accommodate them, like the screen on which movie pictures are spread. Without a screen, there can be no pictures. The screen on which the universe actually appears and moves is thus our own mind, from which it emanates as thoughts either of external physical objects or of internal concepts, sensations, emotions, including the senses of time and space. Those who take themselves for the body take time to be the creator and destroyer of all things, and thus it inspires them with great fear. Fear of future calamities, of death, of loss of fortune and position, or whatever it may be. Many of them consult astrologers to read the decrees of time and foretell events long in advance of their occurrence. To them, birth, youth, old age and death, creation, preservation and dissolution, past, present and future, health and disease, prosperity and adversity all exist without the shadow of a doubt. They fall prey to time and its vagaries. The others who know themselves to be pure spirit are bodiless, timeless and spaceless, and Bhagwan affirms they are thus free from the hallucination of we alone are, time and space are not. Verse 17. To those who have not realized the eye is of the size of the body, to those who have it is limitless. To those who have not realized the self, as well as to those who have the body is eye. To the form the eye is only the size of the body, whereas to those who have realized the self within the body, the eye shines without limits. This is the difference between the two. The jnani, the self-realized like everybody else, refers to the body as I, where the others confine their eye to the flesh and body and to its height and breadth. The jnani takes his eye to be the life which pervades the body as well as the limitless space outside. Realization is the direct and indubitable proof of this truth. Verse 18. To those who have not realized the world is confined to the space it occupies, to those who have, it is the limitless substratum of the world. To those who have realized the self, and to those who have not, the world is real. To the latter, its reality is confined to the spatial measurements of the world, whereas to the former it is formless and shines as the substratum of the world. This is the difference between the two. The space which the world occupies is the limit of the reality to the ignorant jnani, but to the jnani it is the limitless substratum of the world. Science tells us that space is not material, that is, it is not made of atoms and molecules like the objects which occupy it to be visible to the eye. The perception of space by the eye is the worst illusion man suffers. Space is a mental concept, that is, it is a project by the mind to make the reality of the world plausible. If space is a concept, so should be the objects that occupy it, notwithstanding their atoms and molecules. All the universes and galaxies in the cosmos are made of atoms and nothing else. But what are atoms after all but the indestructible absolute energy? The Jnani experiences this energy as the pure intelligence that is himself. The absolute reality is thus absolute energy as well as absolute consciousness, Sat as well as Chit, omnipotent, omnipresent as well as omniscient, the world as well as the creator and seer of the world. Verse 19. Arguments about destiny and free will are carried on by those who have not realized. Those who have are free from both. Disputations are to which prevails over the other. Fate or free will are for those who have no knowledge of the self, which is the ground of both fate and free will. Those who have realized this ground are free from both. Will they be caught by them again? Fate or destiny is karma. Karma, like free will, is unintelligent and can thus affect only the unintelligent in man, namely the body, and not the intelligent being who is the lord of the body. When realization of this is achieved, karma and free will have no feet to stand on and will crumble to dust of their own accord. The scholar do not worry over whether destiny and free will affect the individual or his body, but argue about which of them dominates the other in its operation. Our own approach to this question is simple. We exercise our will freely and let karma take care of itself. Vasishtha Muni exhorts Rama to make constant efforts in his sadhana and forget about all the complexities of destiny. He compares karma and free will to two battling rams, of which the stronger will always win in the end. The strong efforts will overcome destiny. Some theorists stretch themselves so far as to believe that even the exercise of the will is predestined, that is, destiny is always dominant, leaving no room for freedom of the will. If they are right, then religion, ethical conduct, obedience to moral laws, service of man and humane actions are wasted effort, and evil doing will be on par with virtuous deeds. Moreover, man ought to be no better than machines which produce what is put into them, or than animals which are not responsible for their actions and thus not liable to punishment or reward. Fortunately, it is not so. The admission of punishment and reward, which is the fundamental condition in the operation of karma, inevitably leads to the admission of free will. Karma begins to operate only after the will has been exercised ad libitum. The genesis is free will, not karma, which follows it like its shadow. Verse 20. Seeing the self is seeing God, so the self is not other than God. Without seeing the self, the seeing of God is a mental image. Seeing the self is seeing God, they say, completely losing the ego, and seeing the self is finding God, for the self is not other than God. The great Western religions hold that the question of whether there is a God other than man is sacrilegious. The supremacy of God over man, they argue, is so self-evident that the very question is derogatory to God Almighty. Bhagwan answers the question in the negative, because whereas the Western theologians take man to be the nearest dust, the corruptible body. Bhagwan takes him to be the spirit or life within the body, which is infinite and eternal. Those who have no experience of the self but claim to have seen God, Bhagwan asserts, have seen only their own mental picture of God, resembling their own physical picture, more or less having a shape, color, size, etc., which God, the pure spirit, simply does not have. Verse 21. To see God is to be absorbed by God. God is the self, we said, but how to see one's own self, which has no second to perceive or reflect it. Here, seeing the self is knowing the self being pure knowledge itself, the seer and itself the seen, knower and known are thus one and same being. Therefore, seeing God is being dissolved in God or self. Being single draws attention to the freedom of man from his upadhis adjuncts, which are anything but single, with their koshas, organs, faculties, and their manifold qualities such as shape, size, color, smell, and taste. Therefore, to be himself, that is to be single man, the ego had to shed all these superfluities which he has been mistaking for himself and remain as consciousness in the heart. That is the true vision or true being of God. Verse 22. God shines in the mind, but to know God, the mind has to turn inward. The Lord shines within the mind, illuminating it. Unless it turns inward and be fixed in the Lord, it is not possible for the mind to know Him. Mind here is Jiva, which working through its manas, the faculty of the lower intellect, perceives the world and remains always preoccupied with it. Being an intelligent knower, the Jiva is not other than the Lord Himself, but because it is in constant contact with the world, it can have no knowledge of Him or what is the same of itself. To have this knowledge, all it has to do is to turn its attention inwards to the heart where the Lord is seated. This is the same as renouncing the adjuncts mentioned in the last note. Verse 23. Although the world disappears with the eye continues to exist in sleep as in waking. The body does not say I in sleep. No one admits he is not. The I emerging, all else emerges. Enquire with a keen mind where this I arises. The body being insentient knows nothing about I and not I, yet the I persists with or without a body. In the waking state or in sleep or swoon, as the man who himself wakes, swoons and sleeps. To know the true nature of this perennial I, we have to conduct an enquiry into its source. Verse number 24. Neither the body nor the self says I. Between them the ego rises and ties them together. The insentient body does not say I. The ever-existent consciousness is not born, thus cannot say I. The I of the size of the body springs up between the two. It is known as Chit Jada Granthi, the knot which ties together the sentient and insentient bondage, individuality, ego, subtle body, samsara, mind, etc. The body, unaware of its own existence, does not say I, and the self which pure spirit, pure intelligence has never come to and so also does not say I, but somehow the intelligence under the compelling power of avidya, ignorance, assumes the body comes to identify itself with this body and to call itself I, thus tying together body and soul in a note, which is known as the note of ignorance in the heart. Literally, the sentience in sentience note. It is an extremely hard note which defies centuries of births but breaks of its own accord when self-realization is achieved and bondage and ignorance are destroyed forever. Sansara means going round on the wheel of birth and death. In India, the wife is significantly also called Sansara. Verse number 25. The ego takes a body and accomplishes various acts. It takes one body after another till it is destroyed by vichara. Know that this formless ghost, the ego or I, springs up in a form body. Taking a form, it lives, feeds and grows. Leaving a form, it picks up another, but when it is inquired into, it drops the form and takes to flight. The ego is a veritable ghost. A ghost is a disembodied spirit that takes on a shadowy appearance to play the living being and hawks people. The ego also is formless spirit, the Atma itself, but it picks up a body and without knowing it hoaxes others as well as itself. It begins its sansaric career by identifying itself with the body to enjoy the good things of the world. It reaps the retribution of falling into abysmal avidya, ignorance, losing memory of its true nature and acquiring the false notions of having a birth, of acting, eating and growing, of accumulating wealth, marrying and begetting children, of being diseased, hungry and miserable, and finally of dying. But when the time of its redemption draws near, it undergoes an investigation of real nature, of its real nature, sheds its identification with the body, transcends its previous illusions and becomes free once again, full of the bliss of self-discovery and self-knowledge, jnana. Verse number 26. The ego being the all, surrendering, it is surrendering all. The ego existing, all else exists. The ego not existing, nothing else exists. The ego is thus all. Inquiring as to what the ego is therefore surrendering all. Verse 14 also makes the ego or I the all. But here we are led to draw the conclusion that true surrender is the surrender of the ego, which is the totality of the not self or everything, and that the same surrender can be achieved by the method of vichara spoken of before. Verse number 27. To destroy the ego, the source of its emergence has to be sought and retained as the real state. The non-emergence of the I is the state of a being without seeking and attaining the place whence the I emerges. How is one to achieve self-extinction? The non-emergence of the I, without that achievement, how is one to abide as that one's true state? The non-emergence of the I means egolessness, the natural state of being, or that To stop the ego from rising, we have to find the place of its emergence and annihilate it there before it emerges, so that we may consciously ever abide as that, egoless in the heart, as we unconsciously do in sleep. The word place stands here for heart. So I end this video number 2 here, and the remaining verses from 28 to 40 will be taken up in video number 3. So thank you, my dear friends, for watching and listening this video with reverence, patience and continuity. Please like, comment and share the video and subscribe the channel. Thanks a lot, my dear friends. Namaste, namaste.